Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing another rainbow recommendation where I talk to you about a series of just some really good books that all happen to share one common feature, which is the colour of their covers. And today's is kind of yellow, gold, orange, that whole side of the rainbow. And I have 6 books to talk to you about today, all a quite wide variety of genres, including a non-fiction in there. So let's just jump in. Book 1 that I'm going to recommend is Artemis Fowl by Erin Colfer. I'm sure I butchered that name and I'm very sorry. This is a middle grade / YA book series from a very long time ago, which was actually, it first came out when I was a child when I was reading it. Trying not to turn the book cover too much because actually I've got one of the original gold shiny covers and I have them for the first, no, for all of my editions are actually in that. And there's now 7 books in the series and it is being made into a movie very, very soon. But basically, Artemis Fowl is a boy genius who knows that there is an underground world of the Fae that exists, and he is trying to kidnap one of them to ransom for their gold. And he manages to pick the wonderful Holly Short, who is actually a leprechaun, which is an LEP, which is basically their version of the police force. She's this like young rookie and who's trying to kind of make a name for herself, and the two collide with some very entertaining actions and kind of plot to come out of that. I think it's really good fun. All the characters are fantastic and Holly Short was such a role model for me as a kid, and I actually reread the 4 Artemis Fowl books that I read as a kid because there's now 7 in the series. I've not read all of the newer ones that were out since I stopped being of the right kind of age demographic, but I reread all the ones that I read as a child back last year and I really, really enjoyed them. So I would heavily recommend them even for an adult, especially with the movie coming out. And if you have kids, so much fun, perfect for your like pre-teen reader, amazing. A thriller which has kind of a sci-fi slant is one by S.J. Morden. Now this one, the tagline is 8 astronauts, 1 killer, no way home. And it's a bit of a weird, quirky storyline. Honestly, the plot, when you think about it too kind of intensely, starts to fall apart, but I had really good fun with this book and I read it in one day and I really wanted to include it in this recommendation because actually sometimes you just need those good fun, slightly silly, quirky genre books, and this is perfect for that. It tells the story of a world where like crime and prisons have kind of changed a little bit, and basically they have decided to select 8 criminals to then go to Mars to then build the space station that will then be needed for when the astronauts go up there. But then it turns out that there's kind of a big drama once they finally get up there, as people keep dying and they're not too sure, and the 8 criminals who've gone up there, most of them are murderers, so it kind of ties in with that. The character development was a bit strange in this book because it's trying to create sympathy for the main character, who is definitely like a convicted murderer, so it was a little bit weird, but I really enjoyed the science beforehand, and you know, the plot was fun even if it didn't make a crazy amount of sense. And apparently there is a sequel now because I'm not going to go into that because I will spoil it for you, but it's an entertaining book and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're a fan of like quirky thrillers that kind of play around with different weird settings and aren't necessarily a conventional like domestic or detective based one. And also if you're into kind of like space science in any real way, you're gonna love this. Okay, now one of my absolute all-time favorite books is The Bees by Leylan Paul. I think that's how you pronounce that. For my favourite book, I really should learn how to pronounce the author's name. This is a bit of a Marmite book. You're either going to absolutely adore it or absolutely hate it, but it is told from the point of view of a bee, and it covers the inner workings of what it is like to be a bee, and it covers their different life cycle, where they start and how they go from like the drones and the worker bees to like, you know, going out and foraging, and what happens with the queen and like it's just very, very, very cool. Flora 717 is our main character. Because it is literally told from the point of view of a bee, you are getting a lot of that kind of humanity removed from it. So I found it really fascinating because there's just the sheer amount of information about being a bee, and I really enjoyed going with Flora on her journeys and kind of flying with her to find flowers, and then the stuff happening in the hive. They get at one point attacked by wasps. It was generally really, really cool, but I've heard the major criticism for this is like it's just the story of a bee, which for me was its big selling point. So it really depends on kind of what you're going to this book for. Some people have read it as a bit of an intense kind of critique and an understanding of like almost like a dystopian fiction. Honestly, I think you get more out of it by just ignoring that and using this as an opportunity to delve into a world that we know very little about as humans, and kind of experiencing the world of an insect from their point of view. It's clearly so well researched and absolutely fascinating, and gets corroborated with everything I know from like watching documentaries and things about this is how actually possibly B's work. So really cool and interesting. Okay, the only non-fiction on my list I have actually talked about on my channel a few times before, but it is The Pig That Wanted to Be Eaten and 99 Other Thought Experiments by Julian Baggini. This, as the title suggests, is 100 different thought experiments, which are basically kind of like funky, weird scenarios and kind of concepts and ideas that you put to people to then kind of explore their intuition surrounding various different philosophical topics. So often these are scenarios that we cannot possibly create in our world because it's either physically impossible because you're playing around with things that we either don't have the technology for, or like the science isn't there, or they are things that it would be ethically impossible to actually create this. So you try and like almost war games out what would happen in these scenarios, and that's a good way of indicating kind of like different ethical principles and discussing these things on a wider scale. This book covers everything from like metaphysics and discussions of the self and potential like time travel ideas, all the way down to all of the ethical discussions about things like, you know, can you kill 7 to save 1, or can you kill 1 to save 7, and it all keeps going there. I really like hold this book accountable for the reason why I went to university to study philosophy, and I think it's a fantastic place to start if you are interested in exploring any of these ideas further. So it's really good fun, and I definitely recommend it. And because it is done in this like broken up thought experiment way, you can dip in and out and read the ones that are personally interesting for you, and at the end of each thought experiment it gives you the other thought experiments that are linked to it in that way, so you can kind of read around a topic, and then there's a really good bibliography if you do want to then go on to try and look at kind of more of the actual papers that have brought these first things to light. So really cool book. A dystopian fiction now, and that is The Fireman by Joe Hill. This is an absolute beast of a book, but it is one that I really think is worth a read. Joe Hill is one of the sons of Stephen King, and this is, I think, his latest actual full novel that he's had out, although it came out a good few years ago now. Don't quote me on that, I can't remember which way round The Fireman and Nosferatu came out, but this is definitely one of his. I really enjoyed this. This is set in a world where this kind of weird fungus starts to take over, and in doing so it makes people spontaneously combust, and then it's about basically the world burning, and then it becomes your classic dystopian fiction where you have a group of people trying to survive. They're trying to come up with some sort of symbiotic relationship with the virus and discussing various different ways that they might be able to save the world and try and recover from it. And our main character is also pregnant, and is basically, she's contracted the virus. She's not combusted yet, obviously, or else she wouldn't be able to tell the story, and she's trying to keep herself alive long enough so that her baby has a chance of surviving. As is often the case with dystopian fiction, I don't think it ends very well. I think this book goes on for too long and then kind of just peters out at the end, and I personally would have liked it to have at least 100 pages lopped off of it. But I really love the characters. I think Joe Hill is a wonderful author in his own right, and this is a really cool, fun idea. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it. The world building is fantastic. And then I almost don't need to even mention this book because I've talked about it so many times on this channel, but it is yellow, so it does fit in with this category. So I'm gonna mention it again for the like gajillionth time, and that is The 13.5 Lives of Captain Bluebear, a novel by Walter Moers. Walter Moers is one of my all-time favourite authors. If you've been around here for a while, you know that already, and you know I absolutely freaking adore this book already. This is the first book set in the world of Zemonia, and it follows our wonderful character Captain Bluebear and his 13.5 lives bouncing across this continent, meeting a whole host of zany, quirky characters. This is so perfect for fans of like Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman, Tom Holt, any of that really like absurdist fantasy style. You're gonna really enjoy this. I also read this as a kid, so I'd really recommend it for younger audiences as well, although it is detailed and complicated enough that an adult is going to be more than happy. Look at this bad boy, it is huge. You're going to be here for a while. I love the illustrations in the book as well. I've opened to a page that doesn't have an illustration. This is our wonderful Bluebear when he gets aged prematurely. That was a really fun time. He's in a tornado at that point. There's like the spider web there when he meets the Spider Witch, which now just reminds me of Jenna Marbles' Rab Witch. There's all sorts of fun stuff here. It's playing around with fonts and formatting, and it's just so much fun, and I really recommend his work, but I recommend it constantly, so you all know about him by now. So that is it from me. Just a very quick fire kind of couple of recommendations of some just really good books on my shelves that happen to all be yellow or orange in tone that I think that you should check out if any of them sounded like they appealed. I don't have many more left in this series. I'm hoping to get around to pink and purple soon, but I have a series serious lack of pink and purple books on my shelves, and I don't know how that happened, so I'm not too sure when I'm going to do that. And then comment down below if you want me to do like white and black covers, because actually I've got a decent number of both of those, because they're quite common in the publishing world, but they're not really technically rainbow or coloured. So I don't know, comment down below if you enjoy this series and you want to see more from it, basically. That is it from me. Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.